It's time for Zeb at the Ranch with your host Zeb Bell and newsworthy and noteworthy John Ellis. This podcast will always be brutally honest with integrity and honesty and without low-class, no-class cursing that's in vogue today with illiterate politicians. Now, Zeb at the Ranch.
Wow, can you believe it? Episode 16 already. Here we go. Zeb at the Ranch on a Wednesday, January 7th, 2026. And I know I'm going to make a mistake and say 2025. I've already sent out checks that have 25 on them, by the way. Glad to have you with us, Zeb at the Ranch. I am Zeb Bell. And a lot of people say, who is that Zeb Bell character out there in Idaho? Well, I'll give you a little brief synopsis of who I am so you can jot down some notes. Born and raised in Wisconsin on a small horse farm, graduate of Brown Institute of Technology and Broadcasting in Minneapolis, Minnesota. 1969 came to Idaho to be on the radio as a sports director and morning man, and in 1970 started announcing rodeos purely by accident, and it went so well that I decided to turn pro in 1974. And I've been blessed in that career that I retired from recently, but I have announced the National Finals Rodeo 6 times, the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia, and the World Equestrian Games in Spain, and almost every other equine national finals in the United States. And, of course, I've had 2 or 3 different television shows and radio programs. So, that being said, that's a little bit about me. Throw your stones at the radio or the internet service. And I want to tell you what's on the podcast for today. We are blessed to have 2 great people coming on the program. In just a very few minutes, we're going to have one of my favorites from my radio program, and that's Dan Perkins of Florida, author and political analyst. And we're going to be talking about, and I'm making a real quick synopsis here, the jihadi violence against Christians in Nigeria. And quite frankly, the chaos and the killing and the terror is spreading all over the world. And then, of course, at the bottom part of our hour, we're going to have Pastor Alex Lissow from Tennessee coming on, talking about the absolute lunacy of the Trump derangement syndrome, the absolute hate that's going on with the left against common sense in this country, and also the increasing Islamic problem worldwide. But with that being said, right now I'm going to introduce to you the world's best engineer. That's not brag, that's a fact. He knows everything about technology and technocracy, everything else. John Ellis, how are you?
Well, good, but if you want the world's best, I'm going to have to get him on the phone because I'm just a hack, man.
You're no hack. I'll tell you what, you really know what's going on. By the way, welcome to episode 16.
16. I think we've passed a few milestones there, my friend.
And they said we'd never make it to 15.
Here we are.
Absolutely. You know, you are of a libertarian bent.
I am.
And I'm very strong conservative, and we've muddied the waters on various subjects in the past 15 programs, leading up now to 16. And we don't always agree on everything, but we haven't come to fisticuffs yet. So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, today we're going to talk about something I'm sure you agree with in principle, but we may not agree with in execution.
Oh, I love that word.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, the great libertarian Thomas Jefferson, he's my favorite president of all time. His ideas on individual rights strongly influenced the United States Constitution, and particularly the Bill of Rights. One of those rights is due process, and not just for citizens, but for all people. The wording's careful here. They have citizens for some things, persons for others. Due process is a natural right. That means it's endowed by God and should be protected by the government. It's not a privilege granted to citizens by the government. And this is probably where we're going to veer the path between you and I. The recent,
okay.
Yeah,
Here we go.
Here we go. The recent strikes on the so-called Venezuelan drug boat should alarm anyone who believes in the rule of law. When our government destroys a vessel based on suspicion, they become judge, jury, and executioner. A due process evaporates. There are no trials. The crew may have been drug smugglers, but they also may have been fishermen or dissidents that the Venezuelan government just wanted to get rid of by putting the boat in the water and having to shoot it out.
I didn't see any Shakespeare rods and reels on those boats.
No, there probably wasn't. The thing that I have is that the trust us is not the answer, and it doesn't matter which administration, because I actually trust Donald Trump almost explicitly because he just speaks his mind.
Yeah.
So he's not hard to guess what he's saying. But any other administration, I just have a distrust of the government. The part I have a problem with is by simply labeling someone as a terrorist, the government can assassinate them without arrest, indictment, prosecution, conviction, and sentence. That is, without any due process of law. Whether it's a group of concerned parents at a school board meeting in 2022, who the Biden administration wanted to label as domestic terrorists, or the alleged narco-terrorists in the Caribbean. Americans need to lose their lust for blood and embrace the rule of law and the right of due process.
I'm not going to really argue the phraseology that you put in here
Sure.
or your thoughts, but I am going to say this. I am sick and tired of the infiltration of my backyard by people that want to do harm and try to tear apart our society with the drug usage and everything else that's going on. This is our backyard. And if the warnings have been put out there, don't travel here, don't do this, don't do it. And if you're caught in those situations, I'm not going to apologize for what happens.
I understand where you're coming from there. I actually have a pretty simple solution with Venezuela. All you got to do is, well, this is a trick because of Congress, because we haven't declared a war since 1942, and that's how we're supposed to do it. I would say go to Venezuela and say, look, you take care of this problem, or we are going to declare war on Venezuela in our Congress, and then President Trump is going to unleash the hounds of hell and take those people out. And if you get in our way, you're going to get hurt too.
But he didn't do anything wrong by taking Maduro out of office. I'll argue that right down to the Monroe Doctrine, etc.
Yeah.
I absolutely think that when you have a bad guy like Maduro and doing what he has done to society, his own people, and to our society, he was asked by the Democrats in the first time he was in office to get rid of Maduro.
Isn't that ridiculous?
Now he does, and they come out and condemn and damn him.
I find that the most absurd thing. That's why I don't trust any of them, And so, I'm a little mixed on that. But the one thing that brings into question is why didn't they just assassinate him? They're just assassinating these boat people.
But that leads us up to your due process, my friend.
Exactly.
They brought him to New York for due process. Now argue that point.
No. That's what I'm saying is why didn't these lesser criminals, the boat people, get their due process, but this horrible, horrible person, he gets his. My solution is declare war on Venezuela. Let them know we're not going to bomb your cities. We're not going to hurt your citizens if you stay out of our way and let us take out these drug smugglers.
Well, I think what they're doing right now, and I hope it comes to fruition this way, is that the government, our government, with the taking over the country, i.e. in the form of the oil production, the oil shipments, the oil sales, everything. I think that money, if everything goes according to Hoyle, as to what Trump has said and others, Rubio, etc., is going to help and influence of a great economy that Venezuela once had, and they were taken from that economy by Maduro.
That brings me to a little side note. One of the funniest things I think, you're going to love this.
Okay.
Because President Trump says we're going to go in and we're going to run Venezuela for a little while. And people are losing their crap. Well, the fact of the matter is any other president, any other armed conflict, that's what they do, but they just don't say it. This is why I love Trump. That's one of the things I like about him. I don't agree with him on a lot of stuff, but when he says something, he just says the obvious. I mean, it's just, that's the way it is.
Well, he's kind of like that little horse out in front of Kmart. You put a quarter in and it goes forever. And Trump is like that. He's just not going to shut up.
No.
He's not going to back away from topics. But right now, I'll go back to the backyard philosophy again. I don't want all these bad guys in our hemisphere that include China and include Russia, and this inclusiveness is knocking on our door, and I don't like that, and I think it's time to get tough and be the Matt Dillon of Dodge City.
I would agree to that fundamental thought, but let's do it the right way. Let's go through Congress, let's make a declaration of war, and get it done,
But then look at Congress.
Yeah, I knew you were going to bring. I knew you were going to bring that up.
Yes, I am.
When you got traitors that are in Congress,
you look up the word ineptitude, and you're going to see every picture of Congress right there.
Yeah, it's funny because I would pound my desk and say, "You've got to notify Congress of this." But the problem is you've got at least 4 people in Congress that are going to run and tell our enemies what our plans are.
But we don't have a lot of time here, and I want to get right to my dear friend Dan Perkins. But The Congress attitude right now is you've got one side of the aisle that is very supportive of this administration and the backing of our Constitution, supposedly, okay?
And the majority of our country.
Yes. And then on the other side of the aisle, you've got a leftist, communist, socialist attitude that is starting to pervade itself all across this United States. And I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
It scares me to death.
It does. Congress is not what it used to be.
Amen.
You know.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
We didn't come into a fist fight, but anyhow, we'll talk more about that later.
Sure.
John, always appreciate your comments.
Hey, you too, man.
Thanks.
You.
This next gentleman on our podcast for today, I consider a friend. I've called him off the record many, many times for advice, and he's always been very helpful. I have a lot of good attitude about what he has to say. He's an author and political analyst, and he's going to be talking about a subject that a lot of people may not be aware of, but it's growing, unfortunately, all over the globe, and that is an anti-Christian attitude and a murderous attitude against Christians, especially as to what's happened recently in Nigeria. Dan Perkins in Florida. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me on, sir.
Well, Dan, you're also a great author about political activities that are going on. What are your thoughts? Give me a quick synopsis so I can jump in and we can kind of ask questions about this. This massacre over in Nigeria, and like I said, it's going to happen here. It has happened here already in the United States. What's your attitude on this anti-Christian attitude that's going on with the jihadists and Islam in general?
Well, it isn't just in Nigeria. It's in many other countries.
Yes.
And I was listening to you and John talk before I came on, and I understand what John is saying and you are saying. And some of the things that John said I agree with, others I don't agree with. I want to look at three kind of things together where the president has spoke. One is what we just started talking about, the Christians being murdered in Nigeria by the hundreds of thousands. We've got today at about 2:00 Eastern time, I saw a flash where the protesters in Iran have taken over a city and expelled the government officials and the military and the police. Don't know what city it is yet, but the protesters are getting stronger and stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have Venezuela. Venezuela under communist rule through two dictators, and they basically nationalized the oil industry, which we established in Venezuela. And one of the things that all three of those have in common is President Trump. President Trump has said that we had a gentleman who was in charge, not duly elected, but in charge of Venezuela, who was in charge of a drug cartel that sent drugs, heroin and cocaine and fentanyl to the United States that killed over the last decade hundreds of thousands of American citizens.
Right.
And he has penalized the people of Venezuela by destroying their lives. And Donald Trump said, look, we have to do something about this because Venezuela and Russia and Iran are in a cabal that has been sending about 17% of the world's oil production through mystery tankers around the world and selling oil on the black market, bringing in money to each of those three countries, which all three of them desperately need. What's happening, as I see it, is that when Donald Trump said, if the Iranian government is going to start killing the protesters, I got to do something. And then he spoke out about if the terrorist and Islam is going to kill the Christians, I feel like I have to do something about that. Why? Because he's president of the United States, and because he's a Christian man, and because he believes that what's going on is immoral and illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had a lot of presidents who could have done something about all three of these things, but haven't.
Well,
Joe Biden signed the writ of indictment against Maduro, but never sent the Justice Department people or the military to go arrest him and bring him back to the United States.
well, let me jump in here and ask you a question right there before we get past this point. You know, are we becoming, unfortunately, I don't want to see it happen this way, but are we becoming a policeman to the entire world?
I would say we're not becoming, we have been for a long time.
But isn't it more so today than ever before with all the conflicts that are coming forth? Look at the insurrection going on the streets in Iran right now. Look at the problem in Venezuela. Look at the problems right here in the United States. I'm very afraid of becoming the policeman to the world, but who else is going to do the job if we don't get involved?
There's nobody else. And so either we walk away, we become isolationists like we were before the Second World War, and let the rest of the world to try and figure it out, and somebody will take over the power and create the problem, or are we going to do something about the problem? There's a famous quote, when much is given, much is expected.
Absolutely.
And if the Lord has blessed this country with the talent, the people, the resources to take care of not only the country, but to assist the rest of the world, I think we have an obligation to do that. Now, we have a situation in the United States where the vast majority of the electorate does not want to put boots on the ground anywhere in the world. Nowhere. They do not want to see men and women go into the American military and wind up in battle somewhere. And I understand that. That's a reaction to what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran and all those things. But what Trump is doing, taking a different approach, he could have put people on the ground to destroy the Iranian nuclear capability, but he chose not to do that. He chose to use drones and aircraft and missiles and bombers to take them out and destroy them without endangering American men, servicemen and women in doing the task. I think that the technology is such today. Another example of that is look at what Ukraine did with drones in attacking the Russia oil port and almost destroyed it. They didn't put any soldiers on the ground. They used drones to go in and destroy that infrastructure.
Right.
But you've got a situation where we have a problem in our world, and in my opinion, the biggest problem is that for a number of years, through two other presidents, Biden and Obama, we have not been the leader on the world stage. We kind of just wanted to back away.
I agree.
And Biden was the one who decided to try and destroy America.
Well,
but there's one.
Let me get into, because of time constraints, I want to get into the issue that really is foremost of why I wanted you on the program this morning. You know, this jihadi violence against Christians. There's an anti-Christian hostility that is rising all over the world every day, much of which is coming in here to the United States. Address that issue, because quite frankly, I think this is something that the media is not covering it.
Right.
Your local newscasts aren't covering it. The networks. Why? This is a problem where thousands and thousands of people are being killed.
Because while we were a country founded on Judeo-Christian principles, the leadership in case of both parties no longer have Christian values. And so the Christianity that built this country is not here. And so we brought in, and this is really important. When we had immigration, we had the Great Awakening, which was from 1913 to 1960, where we had very significant restrictions on immigrants coming into the country. What Biden did was destroy that whole concept, because we brought in 375,000 Venezuelans. Well, in the 60 years of the Great Awakening, we never had 300,000 people coming from one particular country in 4 years. So what's happened in the case of Minnesota, the Somalis came in mass, hundreds of thousands. They picked Minneapolis and Columbus, Ohio, and now other places to go in. And when they did that, they changed the cultural structure of the communities they were in, including the religious structure.
That's right.
The first book that I wrote was a children's book, and it was titled Peter the Little Irish Seal. And it's based on 5th century Celtic culture, where there was a special breed of seals that lived on an island outside of off the shore of Ireland, who could take off their skin and become human. And I wrote it not because I thought the story was that great. I mean, it's a fascinating story, but I wrote it because my son and daughter-in-law, my daughter-in-law is an Irish citizen, would go to Ireland to be with her family and would come back and talk about how the Muslims and the Islamics have come into Ireland and are trying to change the laws and the culture and the history of the Irish people to reflect Islam. And they're very angry about that. So I wrote this book to try and preserve a little bit of culture, a little bit of history of the Irish people. But what's happening when you come in and you bring in 200,000 people and you put them in a city, you change the culture of that. And you're seeing what's happening in Minneapolis is that not only are they crooks and are they manipulating and stealing from the taxpayers and the government, billions upon billions of dollars, they're also changing the culture to eliminate Christians and Jews.
Okay, but right there, I want you to address this. The news media, like I said just a few moments ago, they will not address the chaos and the killing of Christians, regardless of whether it's in Nigeria or in Europe or anywhere. And in this country, talk shows and TV shows are portraying Christianity as oppressive or outdated or saying that it's not socially acceptable anymore. Why? What happened in this country that was founded upon Judeo-Christian principles? What happened that all of a sudden Christians are supposedly the bad guys?
And what happened is very simple. We had people in the Democratic Party who decided that the government replaces God.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with that. In the 1960s, when we booted God out of schools, that was just the beginning of it, you know.
Absolutely.
Right. So when you get rid of the deity, the founder of religion, Christ, and you replace him with the government, then you have no need. And if you're the news media and subscribe to that philosophy, you have no reason to talk about it.
Do you
because
believe,
it's irrelevant to you.
Do you believe, Dan and John both, I'll throw this question at both of you, that we as a nation are allowing the construction, if you will, of a jihad that's going to take over this country? Look at what's going on in Minneapolis. Look at what's going on in other parts of our country. There are jihad training camps around the United States, some in Oregon, some in upstate New York, etc. Why are we not paying close attention to what's going on with Islamic jihad that wants to kill not only Christians, but also the fabric of our country?
Yes, that's true. And I would say to you, look at the protests. Look at the protests in California, for example, and the protests in Minneapolis on the streets. What flags do you see? Do you see American flags? No. You see flags of Venezuela and of Mexico and other nations. They're using those flags, but they're not American flags.
That's right.
Because they don't believe in America. They're trying to bring their country, their home country, its philosophy and its laws into the United States and change what we do to satisfy them.
You know, getting mass immigration that's not ending in a melting pot. It's becoming pockets of their country that they're bringing in.
That's right.
And that's a problem.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
and
So,
the funny part of this whole thing, Dan, I want you to address this. I did some research on the problems over in Nigeria, and this is almost laughable if it wasn't for the loss of human life. The Nigerian
right,
government said that the attacks on Christians were driven by climate
Oh,
change.
jeez.
right. Yeah. I mean, that that says that the Nigerian government has no value to Christians and the Christian faith and religion. It's remember, I know this is going to sound terrible to say it this way, but we used to say after the or during the Second World War, the only good German is a dead German, or the only good Jap is a dead Jap. Well, right now, what they're saying about what's going on in our country is that the only good American is a dead American because
Yeah.
we want to take over the country.
But what can we do? I mean, let's get to the bottom line right here and cut to the chase. I'm a Christian, proud of it. And I don't think that Christianity is doing enough to stand up and thwart the problem. I think they need more of the verses from the song, the Christian hymn, Onward Christian Soldier. We need to be much more on the offense. I'm sick and tired of being told, turn the other cheek. Well, I've only got two, and after that, you're on your own. What
Right.
do you think needs to be done in this country to stop this chaos from happening here, i.e., what's happening in Nigeria and other places?
The first thing we have to do is do what Donald Trump is doing, and that is to deport as many as the bad guys as possible out of this country. Because it's the bad guys and women who are creating the problem by creating the disruption in the various cities and states across the nation. We've got to get hundreds of thousands of people out of this country and bring the ratios more back into where it should be. Once we, if you're a Christian and you see what's going on in Nigeria, or you see what's going on in the local news about Catholic churches or Christian churches or Jewish churches or whatever, and you see that it's being driven by people who are from mosques and are Muslim in nature, you understand that their God is different than our God, and they want their God to rule. We have to stand up and say, no, we're not going to do that. That's a tough thing to get the American people to do.
I think we're making some strides though with people like Charlie Kirk and those type of movements that are out there. There are people that, and President Trump this term, I think he's been a big help in moving the country in the right direction as far as that goes.
Yeah, but I would jump in and I would say this to you and also Dan. Until the media starts being an honest and fair media and not biased in any one direction, we're never going to accomplish anything.
Don't hold your breath.
Absolutely. Dan, your
Well,
response
but
to that.
I would respond to John by saying, look what happened on the replacement on the CBS Evening News last week. You would think that CBS News would have enough resources to understand production and production values and how to do things on running a network newscast. It was a disaster.
Yep.
Dead airtime, and scripts were put up on the teleprompters wrong, and it was like the staff at CBS News was protesting what the new head of news division is trying to do.
Yeah, I think.
But they're trying to sacrifice the network to get it done.
Yeah.
Until we have a situation where we stand up and get control of the country again, and that's why I think the midterms are important this year, and I think also equally important will be the presidential election in 2028. But I have one quote for you to throw in here as we finish up.
All right.
I was listening to a bunch of commentaries last week, and this one particular person made a comment about who the most dangerous person to our freedom is in the country. You ready?
Yep.
White, unmarried female.
White, unmarried female.
College educated.
Wow.
And all you have to do is go back and look on YouTube and look and on Google, look at all the protests at the college campuses across the country last year, and look and see who the leaders are.
True.
White, unmarried, females, college educated.
You mentioned, and I want to wrap up with this, Dan. I'm a little over, but that's all right. You just mentioned stand up and get control. Well, therein lies the problem. Donald Trump is trying to stand up and get control and pursue the laws and the Constitution and better trade, etc. And I got to take care of that. There we go. And the left is doing everything it can to thwart him. I just watched the mess in Minneapolis this morning before this podcast started, and it seems like the city of Minneapolis, the mayor, the police chief, everybody, they're against the federal government trying to get the bad guys out of their town, and they're going to do everything they can.
Right. To try, even to try to kill them.
Right.
Yes. There's something wrong with America when that's happening.
Well, listen, I would love to ask you many more questions about this, but I'm going to have you back in a couple of weeks. I have the utmost respect for you and your opinions, always on my radio program and now on this podcast. And by the way, I always introduce you as being an author. Do you have any new book projects that you're coming out with in the not-too-distant future?
I have two projects that I'm working on right now. The current book is Sad Eyes, two stories. My first historic romance novel takes place in the Second World War with an Irish lass who becomes a nurse and has a wonderful adventure. So that's available at Amazon. I'm working on a memoir of an Irish gentleman who I met a number of years ago, trying to tell his life story of tragedy and now I'm working on a book that I hope to have out. I'm co-writing with Sheriff Mack, and we're writing a book about the crime that the Democratic Party uses in violence to get its way, and we're going to try and educate the American people.
All right. Well, you're going to be coming back in the not-too-distant future, and we'll talk more about that. But I want to say thank you very much to a dear, dear friend down in Fort Myers, Florida, and that's Dan Perkins. As I said, author and political analyst. God bless you, and I extend to you the happiest of New Year's. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Take care, John.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have Dan Perkins, and we're talking about the jihadi violence that's taking around the world, the assault on Christianity. John, what did you think of the conversation? We got just a few seconds here before we get our dear friend Pastor Alex on.
Oh, Dan's interesting as always. I just love his insights on that stuff. And on the surface of it, when you look at these people, the Somalis, the Nigerians, and so forth, it almost feels like we're being racist about it, but we're not. The fact of the matter is that their goals, when they come into this country, Somalians and the Nigerians in Nigeria that are killing Christians, they're doing bad things. And, I just mean it's a terrible thing that's happening, and I hope we can address that.
I just really am concerned about this deal in Minneapolis because I think it's going to grow into a problem. Look at California. They estimate that it could be as much as 10 times worse in California. And then other states of fraud and the providing money for fraudulent businesses that don't even exist, people that are living on welfare. This problem is not going to go away. But the other side of that coin is also the jihadi violence as to what's taking place around the world, like I said earlier, in Europe and also now in Nigeria, parts of Africa, and it's also happening here. There's already been so-called jihadi violence against Christians here in this United States. We definitely can't be naive.
No.
And we got to stand up and fight the problem.
Well, and we're being painted as white supremacists.
Yeah.
If you're a Christian, you're a white supremacist.
Or a bigot.
Yeah, I have no idea where that comes from. I know lots of black Christians. So how can they be white supremacists?
We better tell everybody how to get a hold of us on the podcast, John. You're good at that. Tell everybody, please.
Yeah, jump in zebbell.com, ZEBBELL.com, and we'll be right there front and center on the page every week. Now, next week, Pay attention. We're going to be starting a little late at 2 p.m. I've got a situation coming up where I'm going to be a little late, so we'll have to start at 2 Mountain Time next week, but we will be here.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I guess we're ready for Pastor Alex. What do I have to hit over here? Anything in particular?
Well, I haven't seen where he's calling in yet.
He just called in on my cell phone a little bit ago.
Unmute 3 and bring him in.
All right, number 3. And we say good afternoon to a man that's moved back to Tennessee, the volunteer state, and we really enjoy his segment called Why Not God, Pastor Alex Lissow. Good afternoon, sir. How are you? And I'm not hearing him. So we'll just tell everybody that perhaps he's... There we go. Pastor Alex, how are you today?
Okay, how are you guys?
You know, I want to take the blame here. That was not John's fault. I let my fingers do the walking like you do through the yellow pages, and I bumped the wrong button, so I'm going to take the blame for that one, John, not you.
That's all right, man.
All right. I'm sure you probably heard some of our conversation that we had just a moment ago with Dan Perkins down in Florida. But you and I talked earlier this week about the hate that is in this country right now. I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime, and you and I are pretty close to the same age. And more of that hatred spilled over in Minneapolis this morning with the ICE agents and a private citizen. What are your thoughts on what's going on? I don't see how we can ever rebuild this again.
Yeah, you know, just before I came into the office back here, I watched a section there where they had a news conference with the mayor of the Minneapolis and this guy Fry, and the language that he was using and the things he was speaking is the total blame is on Trump and the total blame is on the ICE agents. The whole responsibility for the problem is not theirs. There's no responsibility on their part regarding the corruption that's going on in their state. There's no responsibility on their part for the way they've allowed things to transpire relative to you know, I've been back there and I've seen the onslaught that's taken place, and it's just it's not something that is pleasant to see because there's no acculturation that's happening. These people are not coming into the United States and becoming Americans and filtering into the society. And like he called them, the mayor Fry called them, you know, their families and their neighbors and their important members of the. Many of them have no connection to the outside society. They're cloistered within themselves. They still dress like they were in Somalia, and of course, when you hear the news with regards to the millions and probably billions of dollars that have been sent over to Somalia by a lot of these folks that have come over here, plus the things that have been disclosed about the misuse of the various kinds of government support and financial programs, the abuse of that fits royally into this whole concept of fraud, waste, and abuse. It baffles me. How is it that we can call ourselves Americans, especially as leaders of communities and cities and states, and yet at the same time contradict the federal law to protect our society, to protect our country, to protect our people? What the ICE agents are doing is what they're called and required to do. And I don't think the information is all in on this shooting of the driver.
Absolutely.
The little piece that I saw in the clip of the vehicle being taken off, it looked to me like somebody got knocked over, and the word is that the potential was that the ICE agent standing in front of the vehicle was actually going to be run over. And so, you know, I want to hear all the facts before I start just screaming and yelling obscenities and accusing everybody else of being at fault for what I can't manage in my own state.
There you go.
You know what, Pastor? One part of me, the evil part of me, wishes that these leaders who are taking these positions that are contrary to our country would actually have their way so they can experience the natural consequences that are going to happen by these stupid ideas that they have.
You know, John, I won't disagree with you because I've said, maybe not so much publicly, but I have said certainly within my family a number of times, you know, maybe we ought to let everybody that is pushing for all this stuff. Let them have it their way, and just let them find out how bad it can get.
Yeah.
Because and yet at the same time, I certainly wouldn't wish that on my own family, my own relatives, my kids and grandkids, etc. I don't want that to be a situation in my retirement, my older age too. I want to have some comfort and peace, but there is no peace. I mean, I was writing in some notes for my thinking here, and I couldn't stop repeating the word corruption, 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 corruption everywhere. And I said, yes, I believe we Americans are hanging on by our fingernails for what was once a beautiful, faithful, unified, and patriotic country. And now we struggle to hold on to what God gave us. We keep slapping his hand of grace away every time he reaches out to us to fix the problem.
Let me ask you this.
It's ludicrous.
Let me ask you this, Alex. Why is it that both sides, perhaps the city of Minneapolis or the city of Chicago, New York, whatever city you want to choose, can't sit down with the leadership of ICE, the federal government, and say, okay, look, we have got information here that we have X amount of murderers, rapists, child molesters, drug traffickers, etc., that are utilizing your sanctuary city to conduct their business and basically shield themselves away from punishment for their crimes. Why can't there be a working to get the bad people out of there like ICE is trying to do, instead of someone like Mayor Fry coming out and condemning the people that are on the right side of the law and saying that we're going to do all we can to fight them? I just do not understand why this is a problem that has to exist.
The same thing is in my mind as well, Zed. I've sat back and thought to myself, why is this such a problem? Because they are actually coming into the state of Minnesota, to help and support the state, just like they're doing down in Louisiana, just like they did in Washington, D.C. They're coming in to help the state take care of the situations and resolve the corruption and the problems that they see. Why can't they sit down with the leadership and say, okay, this is how we're working through, this is how we're supporting the law enforcement, this is how law enforcement supports us, this is what we do and what we... No, instead, there's a contradiction. I mean, they actually, before they even talked about sending in the National Guard into Minnesota, they were already telling people to be violently against them, to do everything they could to stop them from pursuing their responsibilities, to contradict them at every turn. When you do that, you're just fomenting more violence and more trouble. It kind of reminds me of what Isaiah says. He says, your rulers are rebels and partners with thieves. They all love bribes and chase after gifts. They do not defend the cause of the fatherless or the widows, and they don't come before them. I mean, that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing that our rulers and our leaders, the people responsible for the protection of our society, for the people in their communities, for our nation as a whole, these people are not thinking, all we want to do is destroy one man whose name is Donald Trump.
That's right.
That's all they're trying to do.
And they're going to any limit right now to turn everything against Donald Trump in this administration, and common sense no longer is prevalent on the left side of the aisle. My goodness, I mean, when you can stand there and you can rail on in front of the public media about how bad ICE is and about how bad Trump is and about how, oh my, they're absolutely disorienting families and tearing them apart. I just saw the complete tape this morning of them arresting a known murderer and child molester that was living in a sanctuary city, hiding and in plain sight, and they're protecting that kind of person in society. This is ridiculous.
I know how you can immediately eliminate the illegal immigration problem using the Trump derangement syndrome. You just have Trump come out in favor of it.
Yeah, there you go.
This problem solved right there.
There you go.
And that's exactly, in fact, that's what the news media's been, the conservative news media's been doing. They've been saying, listening to what the Democrat Party and Schumer and these other leaders are saying now, and then shooting back just 4 years ago, and their language and they contradict themselves, and the hypocrisy of it is just unbelievable. And yet at the same time, the American people are duped. And in fact, I was looking at something here in the news yesterday where they say 41% of the people support the efforts of the President of the United States with regard to what he's doing right now, and 43% of the people are against it with regard to Minneapolis and those issues. And I'm thinking to myself, how is that possible?
Yeah.
How is
Yeah.
it possible in
Yeah.
America that we have an equal number of people that are against what is right and proper and just? And I mean, it baffles my mind, and I can't comprehend how this is. I guess I can, but in reality, in my mind, I say to myself, how has it come to this? How has it come to this lunatic kind of mentality that we're
Well,
dealing with?
I think the answer is in what we were talking about a little bit with Dan Perkins earlier, is the demise of Christianity.
Yeah.
And I think you'll agree with me as a pastor that our culture is changing, and whether it's the news media or whether it's talk show hosts or whatever the case might be, or the influx of jihad, Islamic jihad all around the globe to absolutely kill Christians and get rid of them. This is what's causing the problem, I think, worldwide, with nobody getting along, the loss and the lack of being brotherly love with Christianity.
Yeah, we're no longer at a point where there's just disdain for Christianity in this country. We're at a point where there's open hostility.
Hatred.
Hatred. Yes.
Absolutely.
But it reminds me of what the Apostle James wrote in James chapter 4. He says, you desire and you do not have, so you murder, you covet, and you cannot obtain, so you fight and you quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. And that's where I've said this before, the majority of the problems we're facing right now in our country are emotionally driven.
Yeah.
They're not driven with logic and intelligence at all. There's no compromising. There's no working together for peace and reasonable conduct and following the law and accomplishing what we should be as a people, as a unified government. We're emotionally divided to the point where it's almost lunacy.
Why is there, and I asked this somewhat of Dan earlier, why is there, in your opinion, such a profound, growing, cancerous growing hatred of Christianity, not only here but around the world today? Why is it more so today than ever before?
Well, I have to be honest, Zeb. I think part of the problem is the church itself. We've not addressed the issues. The people come to church. The average person, if we want to use an average contention here, the average person comes to church and spends maybe 90 minutes a week in the church. And some of them maybe twice that because they actually come to a Bible study in the morning or a Sunday school class or whatever it is. But the average is about 90 minutes a week. Other than that, the rest of the week they spend out in society being overrun by news media that is contrary to anything that's common sense. There is no support of Christianity through the news media. Certainly there are no, we contradict it in the schools. We don't want God spoken about in the schools. We contradict it. Granted, there are many politicians that we see on the news and who are interviewed by the news media, et cetera, who invoke God and usually they're the conservative types. But the other side is just the apps. In fact, and just to give you an example, yesterday, January 6th, is actually on the church calendar. It's known as Epiphany.
Mm-hmm.
And Epiphany is that time of in the church calendar in which the divine nature of Jesus Christ is revealed.
That's right.
It's when the Magi come and show up.
That's right.
And Jesus is around 2 years old at the point. And Jesus's divinity is then revealed to the world basically at that particular time. Well, guess what the Democrats did? They gathered together with a candlelight vigil, and it was a total focus on January 6th situation in which they were praising January 6th people who fought against they didn't say anything about the murder of this gal Babbitt that was shot to death.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't, and then Smallwell, that blithering, God forgive me. But that guy, he's had the temerity to say that January 6th, the people who protested against what was going on with regard to that election, that January 6th was equivalent to September 11th.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
9/11. And when I heard that, I was furious. because 9/11 was an attack to murder America and Americans.
Do you
And
do you feel, Alex, that I don't even know how to phrase this, but do you feel this is all a under the table plan, program, plot? Incorporated with the Islamic Jihad, whether it's in Nigeria, whether it's in Europe, or whether it's right here in the United States, with the killing of Christians like at the Cross Point Community Church, or a pastor that was literally crucified in this country by a perpetrator. Is this all a plot that is being festered and growing like a cancer and financed by groups that absolutely want the demise of this country?
well, I think it's even beyond just the idea of the demise of this country, as much as it is a demise of a mindset, of a people, of a culture. To me, Jesus made it very obvious when he said, "They hated me before they hated you."
Mm-hmm.
And he was telling the disciples, and he's telling all of us in Scripture, that we are going to contend with these people who are going to try to destroy us all of the time. And it's been that way since the beginning, but it seems to have gotten completely out of control because we have lesser and fewer people that consider themselves Christians and consider themselves people of the faith in the Word of God. And so, yeah, I think there's a concerted effort. I mean, there's no hiding the fact that Islam and the Muslims hate Christians. There's no that they hate the Jews. And first of all, we're the great Satan, America is, and then the smaller Satan, of course, is Israel. And they would love to destroy us and get us. In fact, that's their whole intent. You either convert or die. That's the whole concept. And so that's going to be a battle that we know we're going to face all the time, because it's a culturally driven. It's in the blood, in the very blood of the people who hate that much and want to destroy each other.
I would say that whether or not it's an overt conspiratory that's happening amongst people, we know for a fact that at least in the spiritual realm, there is that conspiracy.
I agree completely. And in fact, we know that that's going to be the battle anyway.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately the battle that is between heaven and earth. And the sad part of this is I can't find in my mind and in my heart any reason why it has to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just because I'm a Christian and you're not, doesn't mean that we can't live next door to each other and live our lives together. It doesn't mean that we can't pass each other in the grocery store and say, "Hey, good morning, how are you?" We don't have to live in each other's house. We don't have to live in each other's minds. And I appreciate the fact that we as Christians are called to be disciples, to go and make disciples by baptizing them and teaching them and so forth, as Jesus says in Matthew 28. But the reality to me is that why can't we live with each other?
Well, the thing is, too, Alex, and I think you'll agree, we've talked about this on numerous occasions, on the air and off the air, is that reverting back to, again, what I said to Dan Perkins earlier, going to the hymn, Onward Christian Soldier. I mean, we've got to be on the offense more than we are. We've always been turning the other cheek and just letting all this happen. And I think it's high time, if not past time, that Christians started standing up for themselves much more so than they have been.
Well, they certainly need to stand up publicly. And I'm not advocating of violence here at all, but at the same time, I am advocating the ability to defend yourself and protect your family. And you ought to be strong enough in your faith to stand up for what. If you can't stand up when somebody attacks the very foundation of your faith, which is the first thing that's supposed to be that holds you together as a human being, if you can't stand up to that, what's the sense? What's the value?
Yeah.
What purpose is there? I don't understand why we don't in the church are more vocal. Oh yeah, I know that we have to be calm and we have to turn the other cheek, and we talk about all this, but that doesn't. At the same time, we're also told in Scripture to go out and make disciples. How do we do that if we don't speak to people about what we believe? And so there are those contradictions. I have many wonderful friends who are pastors. Wonderful guys, blessed teachers, and they know the Word of God and Scripture inside out. but they won't speak out in public because they have an opinion that says this is not a hill I want to die on. And my response to that is, and if that's not the hill you want to die on, then what hill are you going to live on?
Yeah, and the danger factor, quickly respond to this, the danger factor for churches now all across the United States with some of the attacks that we've seen, I mentioned earlier, like what happened with the Cross Point Community Church in Wayne, Michigan, etc.
Yeah.
It's to the point where I'd hate to think about going to church on Sunday morning and having to walk through security guards.
Yeah, it's true, but that is happening in many churches. The last couple of congregations I served, I had a retired police officer who sat in the back of the church with a camera that pointed at all the door entrances to the church after the church service, and his job was to sit, and he had a sidearm, and his job was to watch in case somebody came in into one of the entrances to the building where we were not, because we were busy in the midst of the worship service. And the same thing goes. I mean, it's gotten to where people, my last congregation, just about a little over a month before I retired and left, we had a break-in where they just went in through and stole all kinds of stuff, stole stuff out of my office from me, and they tore things apart. They stole all kinds of microphones and other kinds of communications equipment and so on and so forth. And they had been around the community doing that in a couple of other places as well. The police told us when they came to investigate. And so how do you defend yourself against that? How do you protect yourself against that? And it's a terrible thing. It used to be where the church's doors were unlocked 24 hours a day, so you could come in. You could come in the middle of the night when you were distressed over something, and you could get on your knees and pray and sit there in the quiet of the sanctuary and enjoy the presence of God's presence in your life. Now, you don't want to keep any. In fact, I would never allow a lady in our church who was working back in the kitchen or somewhere else doing something to be in the church alone unless I went out and locked the door when I left so that nobody could get in.
Yeah.
I mean, and when you have to do that kind of thing, you have to ask yourself, what in the world has happened to us?
And that leads me right up to, I think, the most important point in our program, and that's, of course, the prayer for sanity and common sense in this new year, 2026. Please.
And a cure for the TDS.
Absolutely, if there is a cure.
If there is.
Pastor Alex, if you would please, a prayer for sanity for this world.
Well, Psalm 46 tells us that God is our refuge and strength in times of trouble. Gracious Father, we pray for your holy Christian church and for your entire creation. We pray for all people everywhere, people of faith or not, and for those who are confused and inquiring and seeking. Fill us and your true church with all truth, and in all that truth with all your peace. Where the world and the church are corrupt, purify all of it. Where they are in error, direct them. Where we are in anything that we are wrong-headed and amiss, reform us. Where there is righteousness, strengthen us. Where there is want, provide for us. Where we are divided, reunite us. Where we are misguided in our theologies or our philosophies or our actions, emotional, illogical, or frustrated and violent, fix us. Watch over our families and our loved ones and all of those who serve the cause of faith, family, and country for the good of all. For the sake of Jesus Christ, your Son, I pray. In his name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
As usual, and every week, I thank you for your time on this podcast. Pastor Alex Lissow back in Tennessee. And, of course, the segment I love more than anything, and that's In God We Trust. And, of course, Why Not God? Thank you so much, Pastor Lissow. Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great week.
The Lord be with you and John, and God bless your families and just, pray for America, but stand for the truth as well.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you, my dear friend. Talk to you next week. Thank you so much.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pastor Alex Lissow, and he's a dear friend and extremely knowledgeable, and I just hope and pray that the world can be transformed, John. We're in a mess.
Yeah. You know, one thing that strikes me about him, I know he's not perfect. No, none of us are.
Boy, me
But
neither.
isn't he an awesome guy?
I love the guy.
You know?
I love the guy. Him and his wife, Barbara, dear friends, and I'm proud to call him my friend, too.
Yep. I think God's using him very well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we made it through episode 16,
There you
my
go,
friend.
man.
And even with me hitting the wrong button that time, I don't want to put the blame on you. It was all me.
Yeah.
So
Won't be the first time, won't be the last time.
now, next week's going to be a change.
Yes, there is going to be a change. So so you know, you're going to want to tune in at 2 p.m. Mountain Time, not 1 p.m. It's just for next week only. And if you want to tune in, just go to zebbell.com, zebbell.com, and you can tune in right there. And if you want to sign up for Zeb's newsletter, off to the left there, you're going to see a little icon for cow pies and coffee cups. You can click on that and sign up for Zeb's rantings and ravings once a week. And it's always enjoyable for me whenever I read those. Whether I agree with them or not, they're always enjoyable.
John and I will be here next Wednesday, as he aforementioned, hour later, and I don't know how he's going to make it that quick to the studio. Every state policeman probably will be on extra duty watching for him, but God bless you, John. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you, man.
God bless. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today, and Zeb at the Ranch, we'll see you next Wednesday, like he said, at 2 p.m. Mountain Time.